I mean, after 2 years of masks, it's good to see your faces. Each of you uniquely different, and yet a similar bond ensues. What is that? Why do we enjoy and sometimes fear seeing human faces? And when we can't, have you noticed? We resort to bizarre simulations such as these. Happy, bit nervous because of technology. See some smiles, relief. But frankly, is this simulation an adequate representation of a rational, adult human known as Homo sapiens sapiens, a wise, wise man? Really? As if one sapiens wasn't enough. So perhaps we should look into the mirror and try to find out what kind of species we really are. I suggest we take this period of destruction as an occasion to get to know ourselves, you and me, as members of the same human family. I'll start with a confession. It's too late to admit it now, but honestly, I don't think I'm a good candidate to answer tonight's important question, how to restructure what is destructured. And for a simple reason. Long ago, at a young and impressionable age, I imitated some of my teachers. And I did so by learning a strange method of analysis with an odd name at odds with tonight's topic. I was trained, I'm afraid to admit, in the method of deconstruction. Now, deconstruction as a method of philosophical analysis is no longer the latest philosophical trend these days, and have since moved on to different forms of imitation. But I want to reassure you that it's not the same as destruction. On the contrary, deconstruction interrogates the very structure of questions in order to reveal the assumptions they tend to hide. Often it renders oppositions unstable by adding brackets, for instance. Hence, the word destructured, spelled like this, indicates both one thing and its very opposite, namely structured, a typical deconstructive move. It reveals that the problem might be part of the solution. If you now wonder whether I suggested this TEDx talk and we're all part of a conspiracy to smuggle deconstruction back on the scene, the answer is a clear no. Because you see, it spread, once again, via imitation. As you might have guessed, my topic tonight will be imitation. I'd like to convince you that we're all part of a species I propose to call Homo Mimeticus, and that imitation might be the cause we are both enjoying and fearing seeing human faces. For in imitation lies both the danger of destruction and the possibility of reconstruction. Now, that what is destroyed needs to be rebuilt is clear to all. A pandemic virus, catastrophic climate change, and now a horrifying war. And I want to stress that in the context of catastrophic climate change, we really need to change our habits, and soon. So perhaps there is another question hiding behind the one proposed tonight. That is, why on earth do sapient humans keep destroying a planet that might already be past the point of reconstruction? While a number of technological, diplomatic, scientific solutions are currently proposing answers to fix problems from the outside, I suggest that the humanities can help us address this question from the inside. If only because the humanities deal with the inner experience of living a human, all-too-human life, aspiring to become sapiens. There is actually an old humanistic discipline concerned with that question of wisdom. It's called philosophia, literally love of wisdom. Now, for the ancient Greeks, who invented the term, philosophy was not a love for what we already have. On the contrary, it is a love for what we lack, namely self-knowledge. The point was so important that it was inscribed on the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, now in ruins. It stated that the most important thing in life, the one thing that you need to know, is to know yourself. In Greek, gnoti selton. The phrase is usually attributed to Socrates, but it's actually an advice any parent can sympathize. Think of it. If, say, just hypothetically, your children are hammering a toy to pieces, or lighting a fire in the living room to see if the fire alarm goes off. If they do such things, just hypothetically, and then they ask you with a sorry face, "Could you please reconstruct now?" You're entitled to ask them a question or two first. Why did you destroy the toy in the first place? Or why would you try to burn down the house? Were you curious to see if fire burns? Fair enough. But next time, don't push your philosophical curiosity so far, my son. Remember Prometheus? He was severely punished for that. And here I'm talking to my 12-year-old son. He's deep in Greek mythology. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. Try to get to know yourself first, and you might avoid unnecessary distractions. Ergo, you can conclude, with philosophical satisfaction, there will be less need to reconstruct in the end. So this question of self-knowledge makes both practical and logical sense, but of course, it's easier said than done. For how do we really get to know ourselves? And here, I should really stop asking questions. It not only can get annoying, like a mosquito or a gadfly, it can also be dangerous. Remember what happened to Socrates. So to avoid death by poisoning later on, I propose 3 related steps towards self-knowledge in a path or a walk I'd like to take with you tonight. First step. Perhaps the problem with many philosophers was not so much the answer they gave to the know thyself question as to the posture the question tended to induce. Traditionally, one posture went something like this. With all the dangers it entails. An alternative posture went something like this. These are some of the traditional postures philosophers have adopted to ask the big questions. Who are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going? But what if these are good questions, but bad positions or dispositions to ask them? They tend to point, caricatures aside, to a solipsistic ego who tends to be fully rational, autonomous, self-sufficient, often male, Western and white, who doesn't really reflect the diversity we, as a collective, already are. We all noticed during the multiple pandemic lockdowns how this ideal of Homo sapiens didn't work. Not only we are not made to live in isolation, but we actually rely on others for survival. Food, healthcare, emotional care. So if we take this crisis as an occasion to look into the mirror, the first step towards self-knowledge that I suggest is that the self makes sense only in relationship to the other. That there is no self without the other. That we're constantly in interactions that take place in between self and other. Which takes me to the second step. Now, remember that the model of wisdom that we are supposed to imitate, namely Socrates, when he asked his fellow Athenians the know thyself question, he asked so orally. He didn't write an academic paper about it. He talked to people and strangers in the marketplace often not trained in philosophy, but with different technical skills. Or maybe after watching a play at the great theater of Dionysus, which held over 15,000 people. Actually, I think it's 17,000. 17,000, do you imagine? Do you recognize it? Anybody? This is actually the original model of the TED stage, right? Who said that originality is opposed to imitation? A brilliant original idea like TED stage imitates an ancient rhetorical practice where ideas spread on a stage, like this one. Why did they spread? Because we are embodied, affective, and relational creatures who learn through imitation. And so here we are already on the second step towards self-knowledge. Original ideas emerge paradoxically out of imitation. If we aspire to become Homo sapiens, we need to realize first that we are Homo Mimeticus. Now, this mimetic instinct goes so deep in our identity that it is present at birth. The Romantic psychologist Andrew Meltzoff showed this already in the 1970s. Newborns imitate from the first hours of life, literally. Here you see how deep and how far back our mimetic skills actually go. No wonder that we still respond to emojis, right? Seriously, we don't need to learn to imitate. We learn by imitation. The discovery of mirror neurons in the 1990s proved this hypothesis. I see or you see a gesture or a facial expression, say a smile, and the neurons in your brain, the same neurons for the facial expression, activate. We are literally mirroring each other's feelings, as V.S. Ramachandran explained on another TED stage. And even a smiley simulation, as you've just witnessed, can generate a real smile. Now, the last step that I want to emphasize is that this mirroring reflex is amplified in the case of a presence of a lot of people, a public or a crowd. For good sympathetic reasons, if the emotions are positive and constructive, but also for violent and negative reasons if the emotions are destructive. And we see both actually amplified during a war. Destruction on one side, but also sympathy and solidarity on the other side. So you will have guessed my third step. Depending on the models that we imitate, Homo Mimeticus is capable of both destruction and reconstruction. Now, despite the vandalist attempt of my children in the house, they actually contributed positively to this insight by drawing the fact that imitation can be both on the side of destruction and reconstruction. I like to stress that the question of self-knowledge is not a question for academics to be discussed in isolation. On the contrary, it is a journey on a path that concerns relational creatures who are imitative and yet original, and that our survival as a species might depend on that insight. So I conclude with a story. It's a story that can maybe set up a mirror to the future. It's a real story of climate change catastrophe, and it can concern any of us, anytime. You might remember that last December in 2021, there was a devastating tornado hitting Kentucky, as one of many across the world. And it left a rubble of destruction behind, visible from the outside, including this bus stop with a story to tell inside. Picture the scene. A grandmother at home with two babies, 3 months and 15 months, so literally newborns. the house starts shaking. So to protect the babies, the grandma puts the babies in the bathtub. But the shaking escalates. All goes black, and the next thing she knows, the bathtub is gone. And so are the babies, gone. Later, the bathtub is found farther away by a local sheriff. It's overturned. So he turns it over, and guess what? The babies are still inside, untouched, and miraculously well, not even wet. Listen to the grandma telling the story.
That Friday night, I felt the house start shaking. Went to the bathroom and I put both of my boys, grandsons, in my bathtub. This is my bathroom. This is where the tub was. It was just, like a second. It just happened so fast. They were just gone. All at that time, another vehicle come down. You say you've got 2 babies in a bathtub. All they heard was just a little bit of a whimper. Because when they come and told me that the boys were safe, they found them, I lost it. I don't care about none of this.
We see her face, we hear her voice, and because we are Homo Mimeticus, we feel her pathos. She's religious, and thanks God, but she also has a philosophical lesson to teach and to share. Speaking of the house, she says, I don't care about any of this. The only thing she cares about is that the newborns are alive. And here they are. This is a mirror of the human soul I urge you to take home tonight. It makes us see and feel a wise evaluation of what makes a life worth living. In a nutshell, not having things, but human bonds. Not the self in isolation, but unique and irreplaceable relations. In the end, it was good to see you because it was good to feel you. And from that shared feeling of solidarity, from that mimetic bond, we can find the strength and the motivation to reconstruct for newborns to come. Thank you for your attention.